Community Theater in Middletown. This is the interviewer, Ed Strother, talking this morning with John Mark Johns. The date is August 19th, 1985, and John and I are seated at a table down in the theater manager's office on the campus of Ball State University. The time is about 9:33 right at the moment. John, we're going to talk for a half hour. I know that you're a native of Fairmount, Indiana. Now,
That's
pick
right.
it up from there, if you will.
All right. I grew up in Grant County, went to elementary schools in the county school system, and graduated to high school at Fairmount High School. And my best subject there, I suppose, was in skipping classes and working on the stage for Adeline Brookshire, Adeline Knoll, as she is now known. And it's that time that I got the theater bug and thought that was going to be my bread and butter for the rest of my life.
Well, it surprises me to learn that you got classes. I would have put you down as one of the exceptional students at Fairmount.
I was the exceptional, that I spent more time probably in the principal's office explaining why I didn't have a pass to the stage at the correct time and so on.
Well, there was one other exceptional student from Fairmount, and that's Jimmy Dean.
Yes, I worked with Jimmy Dean during his senior year in high school. At the time, I was a student at Ball State, studying English and theater and journalism, and went back to help Adeline, help her as if she needed help, but I thought she did, and I knew it all at that time, and went back to assist in her senior production with James Dean.
What was that show, do you recall?
You Can't Take It With You.
And what role would he have
He
done?
played the grandfather.
I see.
And he was so full of energy and fun. Jim was more of a comic than the public would let him be, and his later Hollywood movies put him in a dramatic role. But he was a comic from the word go, and I always thought that he was another Danny Kaye in that sense. And I think had time been allowed him, he would have come through in the comic aspect of theater.
Did you continue your acquaintance with?
Yes. I talked with him 3 or 4 times in his early New York venture. I think that venture lasted maybe 3 years in New York before he went on to Hollywood. And talked with him after he filmed Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden. I did not get to talk with him after Giant because of his death. But he was so dumbfounded that this little Quaker farm boy could be a star, and was so proud of his paycheck of $10,000 for Rebel and $20,000 for East of Eden, which I believe was his best production, and then moved up into the $1 million mark on Giant before his death. And I have to think, had he lived, what would he have achieved at this point in his life, in the age 55, going on 60? Would he be another Spencer Tracy, or just what would he be like?
When you think of that little farm community of Fairmount, are there other people you recall?
Oh, yes, and I'm probably closer to Phil Jones, age-wise, than James Dean. James Dean must have been about 5 years younger than I was. And, of course, then Jim Davis came along, which...
Tell us who Phil Jones was.
Phil Jones was a CBS News correspondent, or currently is a CBS News correspondent. And his brother is a minister at Upland, and a very fine farming family. Jim Davis's mother and I played percussion instruments in the high school band, so I knew Jim Davis before he was Jim Davis.
Probably before he was a dish rag hung out in hell.
Right.
Well, this is the same Jim Davis that created Garfield.
Right.
and is now really riding quite high because of the great popularity of the Garfield syndicated comic strip.
Right.
Well, Jim was active in theater at Civic. I don't think he ever did anything here at the college, but in Civic he was active.
That's right, and there are times that I think they'd like to get him back on stage, but probably his time commitment won't allow him at this time. At some time, we'll catch him when he will become active in Civic on stage.
Well, I met you, of course, when you came to Ball State University, and I worked with you on a number of shows here. What is your earliest recollection of theater at Ball State?
At Ball State, this was 1946, after I had completed a stint with the Army. And 1946, I recall such plays as Our Town, which I was gopher or assistant director somewhere down in the hierarchy at that point. We also did Apple of His Eye, funny little comedy, which I happened to win an award for that year, presented to me by you, Ed, and Alan Huckleberry.
Oh.
And then the play Wish You Were Here was a musical comedy that I participated in.
I remember that very well.
Played the part of a devil. Required me to use a voice that was falsetto, and
Oh, sorry for that little interruption. We had a delivery of a typewriter that was being repaired. Well, when you were talking, John, you were talking about Wish You Were Here, a musical, as I recall, that was written by Carl Shook and Evelyn Sherpatowski.
Right.
And I've forgotten who the musician was at that time.
I have to.
I want to say Jim something.
Right. In fact, one of the musicians still on the faculty, I think, I can't call his name right now, but...
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You mean on our present faculty?
Present faculty.
Have to become acquainted with him. What other experiences were there
Well,
during those college days?
During, I think, my junior or maybe senior year, you instituted an idea of a student director for a main stage theater at Old Assembly Hall. I still have fond memories of Assembly Hall with all of its deficiencies, acoustics, and what have you. But student director, I was allowed to do my direction of Life with Father, all the redheaded family.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall that young and eager as I was, I wanted realism. So it occurred to me to fry eggs and bacon backstage and use a fan to spread the aroma out across the audience for realism. Now, what I didn't realize that the aroma would last longer than that particular short scene at breakfast. And you pointed that out, saying that that probably wasn't the best idea that a director should ever do. And I learned from that experience. The other incident I recall is in one of the theater classes, you had assigned 3 of us to do a one-act play in which we presented in the old arts building at the stage, I forget Recital Hall. And 3 of us came through with the play, and after it was over, you had one short comment, something to the words, undoubtedly, that was the worst production I have ever seen in my life.
Oh, I was just full of compliments.
And, of course, it was. So we admitted that, but life went on from that point.
Well, life does go on, and to the extent that you did graduate.
I lucked out and graduated in 1949.
Well, summarize your career after graduation.
Okay, after 1949, I took a teaching position at Tipton High School in Tipton, Indiana, where I handled commercial subjects, typing, bookkeeping, and also all of the speech and drama activities there. After 6 years, I went to LaPorte High School, LaPorte, Indiana. Was there 1 year and involved in teaching communications, English, speech, and helped with theater productions and musical productions at that point.
No yearbook?
No yearbook. I lucked out on that one.
Well, is this when you became acquainted or became affiliated with Ball State?
Yes. Dr. Emmons called me one day, long distance LaPorte, and asked if I'd be interested in joining the faculty at Ball State, which I accepted on the spot, and came to Ball State doing sports publicity as halftime and teaching halftime at Burris in speech and communications, and another halftime in the College of Business teaching typing and bookkeeping, which adds up to more than a full-time job.
Well, full-time at that time was 16 hours of classwork,
Right,
as I recall.
right.
So, yes, you did have more than...
And being married and 2 young children at home, that was a little bit stressful in as much as I needed to attend all the basketball games, football games, and what have you as far as
But
sports.
still, it was a job you loved.
It was a job I loved. And then I left for the University of Denver, received my doctorate in 1963, and came back to Ball State full-time teaching in College of Business. And outside of 1 year that I spent in Boise State College in administration and teaching, I've been Ball State ever since, and have enjoyed it.
Well, we know.
If I can back up there, when I first came back to Ball State in 1956, Shoestring Theater was in operation at that time. And I recall the big tent out on the north campus. It's really a little more than a cornfield at the time. We did the 7-Year Itch play. Bob Miller directed 7-Year Itch at that time.
I have a recollection of that play, too. Phyllis Abrams.
Phyllis Abrams.
Was the seductress, or the upstairs girl,
Right.
Who came down through the hole in the wall or something. But Phil went on to do some professional work.
That's right. I don't know her whereabouts or...
Well, she is now in Beverly Hills or Studio City, one of those two locales. But she did have some good luck. She was in a touring show with John Agar. I believe that was the husband of Shirley Temple, wasn't it?
Right.
In a show called Pajama Tops. It was a frivolous little thing, but she did tour with that and had some good success. She was in a movie with Jack Lemmon, The Glass Bottom Boat. She also was in a pilot TV show, the something or other Beach Bums. It didn't make it on TV, but she played the role of a sophisticate in that particular role.
She had a lot of talent.
Yeah, every once in a while she still gets into a movie or a TV show. Nothing big, but it helps out, especially with residuals when they're replayed.
Certainly.
Her stage name, or her other name right now, is Leslie Vallon. So if you ever see a credit on the screen of Leslie Vallon, you know that is Phyllis Abrams.
Right, and I will know that it was her flower pot that did it all.
Well, you became acquainted. What was your first experience with Civic? We really ought to get around to Civic.
Civic was when we were at the Masonic Temple. Now, this would have been 1956, 7, 8, somewhere along in there. And as I did some acting and some directing for Civic at that time, played Gazebo.
We both worked together on that.
And then you and I did the remarkable Mr. Pennypacker, which has to be the star of my memory.
Yeah.
You playing Mr. Pennypacker, complete with 2 families, one in Philadelphia and one in Boston or somewhere in the East.
Mm-hmm.
I was your minister trying to reconcile and point out the troubles you were headed for and the error of your way, and it virtually ended up you justified your position and almost questioned mine that I would settle down to be a minister with one family, or with one wife and family.
Almost made a Mormon.
Right. You said that one. That one was an outstanding one. I think playing with Ed Langus, the late Ed Langus in The Rainmaker, was also one of play that I remember from Masonic Temple. And working with Irene and Helen Myers and yourself and Earl Williams and Dick and Dottie Bump and those people were quite good memories.
Yes.
Very wholesome.
Do you recall the year you were president?
It was about 3 years ago, I guess about 1981, maybe 81 era. I don't have it written down anywhere. And that was a year, of course, the 50th anniversary. And ironically, we were at a plateau, somewhat of a static point at that time, as I look at it in retrospect. Not really knowing our direction for the future. And I suppose the highlight of my tenure at that time was the creation of the long-term study made up of some 20 individuals from theater as well as from community.
And the general chairman?
General Chairman Betty Henshaw was general chairman of this. And we sat in several sessions, 10, 12 sessions, as a total group or smaller groups, trying to format or blueprint where we should be in 1985 and 1990 and so on into the next decade, financially as well as artistically. And I suppose in May, when I took over as president, the Love study came in from the architect, Love and Graham, I believe is the name, that pointed out the deficiencies of the theater, and like it would take $1 million to really put it into a good operating and safe position, which just about floored me as president. And I began to wonder if we should stay in the building when we were considering safety of our membership and the audience. And we spent some time looking at other kinds of facilities or alternatives to the theater. I believe it was you that came up with the idea of moving out.
Yes, I was rather unpopular at that particular time because so many members of that committee and of the board, for that matter, wanted to remain in that old historic building, the Voice Block, and probably with just cause. But like you, I was concerned about safety as well as the artistic statement of the show.
I think that moved me to get together with 3 or 4 others, and we toured the city trying to find a suitable facility. We looked at the vacated J.C. Penney store, which would require a lease and quite a bit of renovation. We looked at the Muncie Mall to see if there was any area out there that would lend itself to it. Again, that was a lease and a long-term commitment. We even went down to the Masonic Temple and began to think, should we return to the safe and secure Masonic Temple with all of its deficiencies as far as artistic presentations. But we came back. We came back to the theater and began to institute some of the safety factors that were necessary, such as alarm systems and ushers that carried real live flashlights in case the lights went out, and instructed our cast and our crews of what to do in an emergency and who would be responsible in case of an emergency. And those little housekeeping.
Well, of course, one of the outcomes of that long-range planning we're beginning to see right now with our theater refurbishing campaign that's going on.
Yes.
And I think at the time of this conversation right now, John, so far we have had pledged something like $265,000.
Right.
And
that's still going on, the pledge.
Yeah. Well,
situation.
yes, for another 2 or 3 months, I would
Mhm.
imagine, before it can be completed. But we're well on our way. And they have let the contract for the renovation of the exterior.
Exterior and windows, weather, well, whatever you call them, the insulated windows for the theater and fire doors. So I suppose those years where we worried, now we're beginning to get a payback, so to speak, of that worry.
Mm-hmm. What other recollection do you have during your tenure as president, John?
Well, as we mentioned, that was the 50th anniversary year. We did Dulcy. I directed Dulcy for its comeback or revival.
Mm-hmm.
It met mixed reviews. It wasn't one that people will remember forever and ever. Maybe in another 50 years they'll remember. But the play was a little bit dated for the 1980s. We're talking about a 1930-something, which was probably a popular play in 1930.
Yeah. Was the year a successful year in terms of income?
Yes, we came out ahead on the budget, a little bit of a plus sign.
What is their budget now? Or what was
well,
it?
at that time it was about $80,000 to $82,000 budget, and it was also at that time that with that amount of money, I was concerned about the accountability, the bookkeeping process, and the planning process, the budget for the future year, and so on. And we attempted to get the books in a little more organized fashion. It was still a hand bookkeeping system. Now it's computerized, which makes it much more.
Yeah, technology has come into play. Right. When you think of the future, John, what things do you put on top of the list of things that must get accomplished?
Well, outside of the physical aspect of the building, after all, we are artistic and a production company, and I guess business aspects of it takes a second or back seat when you think of it in that terms, although it's necessary to have a backseat driver. Still, those in the control of the thing has to be looking at the production. And I suppose we have not really done enough as far as the artistic, from the children's theater point of view. We do not have a school at Civic Theater for upcoming directors and technicians.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that we've got to begin to work with, in conjunction with the college. We have good rapport with the college, but we also realize that most of the college students, once their college days are over, will be leaving the community. I'm thinking more of those who stay in the community,
True,
who are future directors and assistant directors and technicians.
In our earlier conversation, you also put very high the need for an endowment.
Oh, yes, that is paramount. The endowment, and it's got to be a significant sum so that you live on the interest rather than the principal amount of the endowment.
Mm-hmm.
That you can add those little touches that make all the difference in the world. Instead of spending $200 on set construction, a few more dollars gives it the polished, needed effect for the theater.
True. Well, on that future note, maybe we'd better bring things to a close. This is Community Theater in Middletown. Ed Strother talking with John Mark Johns on August 19th, 1985.